Today's video is an hour-long compilation of stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to this video in the background next time you're doing homework, playing with your pet, or while you're washing the dishes. You can always leave timestamps down in the comments so your fellow listeners can use it to skip through stories they've listened to. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit the bell icon to turn on notifications so you don't miss our next uploads. Thank you, and enjoy the video. I've had so many unshakable experiences, but I will share the one that I have zero explanation for. Some years ago, I moved in with a significant other, now ex. He had his own house, a small 2-bedroom rancher. He had lived in it for about 10 years before I moved in. I lived there about 9 months. At any rate, it was built in the 60s as a vacation home. Shortly after moving in, I laid down to rest in the master bedroom. I couldn't sleep, but it was nice to rest my eyes. Suddenly, images and thoughts that were not mine beset me. There wasn't a specific story, but the image of someone hanging themselves in the bedroom kept repeating. I was disturbed and got up. This happened several times, and I gave up the prospect of taking a daytime nap. Toward the end of the relationship/living there, my ex was talking to me about his previous residences, and he mentioned that he found his current residence after the previous owner had committed self-termination. The man had hanged himself in the master bedroom and had died in the ambulance en route to the hospital. I live in the woods in a small town in Massachusetts. My house is in a pretty quiet neighborhood, but is a part of what they call the Bridgewater Triangle, which consists of a bunch of towns in Massachusetts where paranormal/supernatural things have been happening since the 1800s. I live near the Freetown State Forest, which is known for brutal murders that have taken place in there, cult activity, satanic rituals, countless UFO sightings. A dug-up pet cemetery have been there once, very unsettling and unforgettable, etc. UFOs have been reported many times in the Freetown State Forest. I live on the edge of it, but have never really seen a UFO or had experienced any crazy paranormal events, though there have been a few. When I was about 12 years old, I remember my room slowly lighting up around 1 a.m. Wasn't anything crazy, but my dark room slowly became dim. I got up to look out the window and saw a triangular-shaped UFO hovering over the woods. I woke up my parents, but when they came to my room, it was gone. The next week, around the same time, my room lit the F up. It was crazy. I could barely see in front of me because that's how bright the light was. I was too terrified to call out to my parents, and fortunately, the light only lasted about 7 seconds or so. When it was over, I looked outside to see no cars or anything, not to mention there was no sound of any engines or such. I've only told my best friend who believes in aliens and my parents when the event passed. I will never forget that crap. Always a little harder to trust the memories of a child, especially at a time they were supposed to be asleep. Dreams and memories are tricky little things. Hey, I'm not saying it couldn't be something more, but I'm not quite convinced. My mom has claimed a guardian angel her whole life who tells her when important events are about to happen. I was always skeptical, but my mom always knew of something about to happen. I was 17 years old and started talking to a girl that would have a huge impact in my life, and I dated for 3 years. My best friend and I were planning on going to her volleyball game as she played club and varsity volleyball at the time. I've only been talking to her on my cell phone and instant messenger at this point. I hadn't told my mom what was going on or that I was talking to this girl. She randomly asks me that morning, "Who is this volleyball girl?" Stunned, I asked her how she knew I was talking to a girl who played volleyball. Her response was, "My guardian angel told me in a dream last night something big is about to happen with a girl who plays volleyball." I admitted I was going to a volleyball game that afternoon, and my mom was visibly wowed. That day began my 3-year relationship and my high school girlfriend. It's so weird, but this wasn't the only time. My dad got into a near-fatal car crash, and my mom knew. She even knew where the crash was before the police called. She got to the crash site before the helicopter airlifted my dad to the hospital. Even the police were dumbfounded. I was in New Orleans for a conference and had some downtime, so we went on a haunted ghost tour because my friend researched it and thought it'd be fun. It was a good time as our guide was really good and entertaining. We got to the halfway point where we could get rehydrated or some booze. I decided to go to the bathroom and thought there was a line since there was a lot of guys on the tour. As I saw a guy wait outside, he warned me that there was a ghost in the bathroom. I didn't believe him because 1, I really had to go, and 2, thought he was a local yanking my chain. Well, as I pushed the door open, it wouldn't open. It was as if someone else was on the other side holding it back. I eventually go inside and felt this huge weight all around my body, so I quickly peed and bolted out. As I went to rejoin the group, a little boy that was with the tour was telling his mom that the bathroom felt weird. I hadn't even talked to him or acknowledged him, and yet he felt the same thing. The most interesting thing about this is that I got that beginning part before peeing, of course, on video as I was vlogging the trip. I have two. The first, I was about 9 or 10 and lived in a small rural town in the UK. There wasn't much to do, so me and my best friend's favorite thing to do was go swimming at the sports center. Being young, we needed to be picked up by his parents. On our drive out, we all notice a light in the sky. His mom is pointing out at first. The light is bright white and it's just hovering over a field. When we notice two jets coming to investigate, all of this is at night, we recognize the jets by the lights as we have an RAF base about 10 miles down the road. His mom stops the car and lets us get out to watch. We'll conclude this is weird as hell, and it's a talking point in the playground for the next few days. I've tried to research this as an adult, even asking my friend's mom when I have visited if my memory is correct, which she confirmed it is, and still to this day we have no idea what it was. The second is at university. I lived in the converted attic in my student house, and in my opinion, I have the best room. I'd spend money on making it the best place to chill out, but people never liked the feel of my room. They said it felt cold, which I put down to its position in the house. Towards the end of my third year, I experienced sleep paralysis for the first time. My bed is parallel to my wardrobe, and one night the door cracks open and out pops the old hag. I call her a number of insults in my own head. Unable to move, I finally manage to free myself of the terror. I wake up, read up on what happened, and put it down to stress of my dissertation/uni life. This continues a couple of times, seeing a black demon dancing over me, a man stood where my coat was. All in all, craps me up, but I'm rational and understand I'm stressed. Cut forward to my new girlfriend is staying over for one of the first times. She's scared of most things, so I never bring up the room's common theme of making people uncomfortable. We chill, watch her suggested Disney movies, and fall asleep. Morning arrives and she looks like she had a bad sleep. I myself saw the old hag sat on my wardrobe staring at me, but it had become an understanding that this was psychological, or at least I thought. I ask her if she slept well, to which she looks at me and says, "No, not really. I had a horrible dream that there was an old woman in your wardrobe staring at me most of the night." We live together now, and we always talk about that night and what we saw. It's become a joke more than anything now. Makes me wonder if you were dealing with some infrasound in your room. If you don't know what that is, I highly recommend reading up on it. It is about the only explanation I've got at the moment, but that is still creepy as heck. Sleep paralysis sucks, and I speak from a little bit of experience. I've had so many paranormal encounters that it would take at least an hour to put them all, but here are a few notable ones. I live on the third top floor in my apartment building, and I have an attic. I constantly hear banging coming from said attic. Everyone that comes up to my house even hears the banging. There was a time a small bowl was thrown at me. A couple plates fell from the kitchen counter when they had no chance of falling at all. And I'm fairly certain there is some spirit following my family too, because when I lived in a different apartment, things would move around and would get unnatural shadows caught on cam, and a person that was used to spirits was too frightened to even enter the house. I've also seen weird creatures before, and one I'm fairly certain was Mothman. I probably sound crazy. LOL. Driving home from school through Southwick, Massachusetts, and saw a yellowish circular light in the sky, maybe 1/2 to 3/4 the size of the sun or moon, to the northeast. It was just hanging in one place and not moving from my point of view even though I was driving. So I figured it was moving in a way that my perspective didn't change, or it was really far away. I lost sight of it when I passed a buffer of trees, and it was gone when I got to the field on the other side. I talked to my chem teacher later about it, and she told me Southwick is known for UFOs and there's some movies about it. I don't think it was aliens or anything, but I have no damn idea what it was. Just really strange. Unidentified, flying something. Years ago, my mother-in-law died in my living room. She had a massive pulmonary embolus, so it was sudden and traumatic. My significant other is a physician and was with her and our children when it occurred. I was at class. My significant other did CPR on her all the way to the hospital. A week after her funeral, I'm alone in the house at around 3:45 p.m., about the time the kids came home. Suddenly, I hear blasting out the sound of a million birds inside my house. I figured the kids had come in without me hearing them and had turned the TV on too high. I yelled, "Turn it down now!" The sound immediately stops. I continue folding laundry, then I hear the sound of keys in the lock at the front door. I walk to the entry in time to see all 4 of our kids come in. They all swore they'd just gotten off the school bus, which I could see pulling up the street. A month or so later, my significant other's aunt visited and tearfully told of hearing a bunch of birds singing after her sister, my mother-in-law, died. The previous owner of the house that my dad lives in died in the basement. He was working on his treadmill, had a heart attack, and his wife found him. Ever since my dad moved in, weird crap has been happening. Cabinets opening and closing by themselves, things being moved, etc. One night my girlfriend, our friend, and I were in the basement hanging out at the bar down there and just talking. My dad yelled down the stairs that he was running down to the neighbors for a bit, and we heard him fire up his ATV and take off. About 5 minutes later, we hear the screen door open, someone walk into the house, to the kitchen, back to my dad's bedroom, and walk back up to the kitchen. It seemed kind of odd because none of us heard the ATV pull up to the house. I immediately went upstairs to see who was there, and there was nobody. I checked the whole house. I thought that somebody maybe snuck in and then back out, but my girlfriend and her friends both said they didn't hear any more footsteps when I went up to look. That happened 2 years ago, and it still gives me chills thinking about it. It was me who did the confessing. When I was 18, I was assaulted on a bridge in the middle of the night when I was all alone. My mom works in hearing, and she had always told me to bite someone if I got into trouble. So I did. I bit into his neck until my teeth met again. He fell down, and I ran all the way home. A few weeks later, I read in the news that a serial assaulter had gone to the hospital with neck wounds and later died. They'd drawn it down to him attacking someone and them acting in self-defense. I never told anyone until I got really drunk with my boyfriend last year and spilled it. He couldn't believe I'd kept that secret. If it's any consolation whatsoever, good on you. People, defend yourselves however you can in those situations. There's no such thing as fair when it's assault or your life. My best friend disappeared for a while, presumably left town. We were both in our mid-20s. He came back after a month or so, and he'd taken me out every night drinking and partying. I wondered how he was able to blow so much money on drugs and alcohol, but he wouldn't tell me. I saw him pay our tab one night, and he must have had 12 or 15 grand on him. After coming back to town, he basically stayed inebriated at all times and wanted to hang out with me whenever he could. He'd come over to my place after closing the bars down, and we'd often keep partying until morning. He would usually end up breaking down and crying to me about how he can't live with himself over what he did. He wouldn't give details. Night after night this would happen until he broke down again one night and told me he was paid a lot of money to do some bad things to bad people. He confessed that he was paid by someone in his dad's gang to burn someone's business down over a money dispute. Then he told me he killed a couple of guys who were thought to be molesting children. He said he was given a handgun and a shotgun and was paid $10,000 after each man was executed. More than 10 years later, I still don't know if I believe him or not. After he came back, he was so effed up and depressed. If he was telling the truth, it would make sense. He kept doing drugs and drinking until about 5 years ago when he had a heart attack at age 27. He quit using drugs and alcohol, but the damage was done. He suffered another heart attack 6 months later and died a few days after his 28th birthday. He was the funniest and kindest person that I've known, and I miss him. My mom was in another state for business. A company flew her crew out to Texas to discuss a change in software and offered their company. And so it was just my dad taking care of me. I was about 10 and he came to tuck me in one night, but he was incredibly hammered. He opened the door to my bedroom, told me I was a mistake that saved them from getting a divorce, and good night. The worst part is, he didn't close the door completely when he left. At a family gathering, my grandma got tipsy and started to tell stories from her childhood. While she does this every time, no matter tipsy or sober, I guess it's just a normal grandma thing, this time it took a dark turn. She told us a story that is the reason she hates to go to the dentist and particularly hates the drilling part. She told us a story about when she was 6 years old. During World War II, my family lived in Hamburg, Germany, right next to the harbor. During a particular week in 1943, the city was continuously bombed and over 35,000 people died, and more than 100,000 people were injured. The houses that were hit mostly burned down, creating a huge fire with such force that it sucked not only oxygen in, creating strong winds, but also people. The fire created such heat that people running out of their burning houses got stuck in the molten asphalt on the streets and burned to death. As it was all happening around her, that particular smell was present for over a week in her part of the city. Drilling in your tooth creates exactly that smell. My grandma had to stop the dentist as she recognized the smell immediately. The story shook us to the core as it came out of the blue. It still sends chills down my spine. Good Lord. To experience that as a small child and have that sense memory your entire life, I can't even begin to imagine what that must have been like for her. That's just awful. When I was 14, my mom took my sisters and me and a couple of our friends to the beach. My sister, 15, and I got our own room with our 2 friends and wound up meeting some boys and getting drunk. My sister's friend, 15 female, was really drunk and got super upset and confessed that her stepfather had been molesting her, R-ing her for years. Really, really, really horrible stuff. It sobered everyone up fast. We rallied around her, told her we were there for her, yada yada, but when we got home from the beach trip a few days later, I knew I needed to tell my mom. After I told my mom, she got the state police involved, there was a trial, and the man wound up sentenced to 8 years in prison. It turned out he was doing it to the younger sister as well. That's beyond awful, but you did the right thing telling someone. I feel terrible for those poor girls. One day, my dad went to a bar by himself, got crap-faced, and tried to ride his motorcycle home. He crashed it into our neighbor's mailbox, effing up both the bike and his knee. As I was treating his wound, he confessed about how he had been cheating on my mom with a coworker over the last few months, and he was drinking out of depression, because the coworker quit her job and ghosted him after she got him to spend thousands on buying her expensive gifts. He then cried his eyes out, and this was my first time ever seeing him shed a single tear in my life. I was only like 16, 17 at the time. It was a lot to take in. My friend's husband told me he was hiding liquor from his wife, my friend, which was weird because they both drink and it's not a big deal. I told my friend what he said, she confronted him, and all of his lies started pouring out. Cheating on her with multiple women, lying about his income, taking CCs out in her name, racking up tens of thousands of dollars on them, stealing from their kids' college funds. They are now divorced. That weird little lie he told me while drunk is what started it all. I had a boyfriend who never talked about his past ever. He talked so fondly of his old state, but just about the actual state, never about people. If you tried to prod further, he would just say, oh well, it doesn't matter anymore. We were young, I was about 19 and he was probably 23 or so. He drank a crap ton all the time and whatever, we were young, so I just thought that it was normal and all in good fun. One night while crap-faced, he started talking about how much he loved going into the woods and how he and his friends enjoyed playing on the rivers and streams in his old state. Then he got very sad and started to babble a bit incoherently. I heard him say something along the lines of his friend came to his house on M, and they were all also on drugs. Then more incoherent babble, then something about his friend getting shot in the face. Then more incoherent babbling, then something about that is why he can never go home again. He was so desperately sad and missed his home very much. You could tell every time the topic came up. So yeah, I am pretty sure he accidentally or on purpose killed a guy and was on the run. I have my money on accident because he seems so distraught, but you never know. And you barely know anyone or anything at 19 years old. I often wonder if he ever had to face those demons. The thing about a past like that is I feel it always catches up with you in one way or another. If not something directly confronting him, then his own mind, for sure. My mother's first husband, the sperm donor. I was 16. She had just walked out on that same day and he got extremely drunk and told me that I was never supposed to have been born and that I should have died with my brother. I asked him what he meant by my brother since I had no siblings, and he confessed to beating the crap out of my mother when she was pregnant and she ended up in the hospital. I was born, but my twin brother died in the womb. At the time, my mother's English, she's Polish, was not good, so he claimed to the doctors that she'd fell down the stairs and threatened to have her deported and used me as blackmail if she ever told anyone. I followed her soon after once she had contacted me that she'd found a place to stay. I asked her if she had anything to tell me regarding my birth, and she told me the same story. I guess that explains why I felt like I was missing a part of myself all my life. My mother once told me a story while drunk. She had a pregnancy before me, but her boyfriend wasn't ready for a kid, so he kicked her in the stomach until she was no longer pregnant. So for revenge, she had her friend, who was a prostitute, seduce him, take him to a motel, and tie him up. My mom then described how she took a baseball bat and broke every bone she could of his. Described how she had to throw water on him to keep him awake. She was never tried for it, so I'm assuming he lived. I had heard the kicks in the stomach till miscarriage part before. The whole bat thing was a new detail. She hasn't mentioned it since. My girlfriend at the time confessed that she only started dating me because I'm a relatively big guy, and she basically used me for protection after being assaulted about a month before we met. I knew about the assault, but not that aspect, although it explained a lot of the problems in our relationship. What happened was we made out at a party, word got around, and overnight any guy that knew us stopped hitting on her. From that point on, she decided that fake dating me was worth feeling safe. On the one hand, I totally get it, and I'm glad that in some twisted way I was able to help her get over that trauma, but it did hurt like hell realizing the girl I fell in love with effectively saw me as a bodyguard. Found out not long after that she regularly flirted with other guys behind my back, knowing that they would never actually pursue her because of me, and a few times later in the relationship she actually did cheat on me. Fell into a deep depression and couldn't tell anybody why, because that story getting out would have crushed her well beyond being an appropriate retaliation. I don't want to blame her on the hand that she went through a trauma and wanted to feel safe, but using another person like that for that long and lying to them, sorry, but she has to take responsibility for that because that is awful. It was a shuttered factory complex in Eastern Europe with a large bunker system underneath the building. There were several rooms literally lined with ripped open first aid kits with the empty morphine needles scattered around. Whoever used them was perfectly content to basically live in a damp, dark, partially burnt out, musty hole filled with Cold War propaganda and imagery through the duration those needles lasted. A little late to the party, but I've got two good ones which I found really unsettling. The first one was in this old abandoned shack thing, a pile of clothes and things like a toothbrush, hair product, etc., but completely old and dusty and hadn't been touched in a long time. It was clear someone was living there and left immediately without collecting any of their things. On the window were markings like an old prison film counting off the days. I think there were about 100 of them. The second one I can upload a picture of if there's any interest. I found an old abandoned shipping container in a desolate warehouse. A poem scratched on where it was almost impossible to see, not in an obvious place at all. There is no solace for such as we, who search for a city we shall never see. Only the sun, the wind, the rain, a lonely campfire, then the road again. S.H. 1981 to 1984. It was the dates of the initials which made me really sad. I guessed it was written for someone who died at 3 years old, and it was in such an obscure place it seemed to have been written with the intention of never being read. Also, scratching on the same shipping container I found, I assume by somebody else, "My life is worthless. Find me. August 15, 2012. This was in 2013 that I found it. It was very unsettling. When I'm home, I'll upload pictures if anyone comments wanting to see them. That is all pretty sad, but that poem was honestly kind of beautiful. There's an old abandoned warehouse not too far from where one of my friends live. I was visiting, and we like to go places you're not supposed to go. One night, a group of people decided to skin another person alive because they didn't like him inside this building. You can still see splatters of blood on the walls. Guess they didn't feel the need to clean it up too well since it is boarded up and whatnot. The entire place feels eerie and makes you angry, like ridiculously angry for no apparent reason. Apparently, there's a ton of asbestos and other bad-for-you materials in there. If I find a picture on my laptop, I will post it. I'll play the role of villain in this story. A buddy and I used to hang out in this abandoned mansion in our city, cleaning and fixing whatever fixtures were left behind. We put a lot of what into that place to make it nice. But one day, a group of teenagers smashed through a glass door to come in and smoke pot. The mansion was usually pitch black in most of the rooms, but I knew the place well enough to navigate without hurting myself. These kids did not. While they're crashing and banging about in my project, I would follow very quietly and slide things across the floor to make noise. Eventually, these kids started getting even more brazen, breaking lamps and punching holes in the wall, and one gets on the phone with a friend to set up a party. So, my buddy crawls into a cabinet and starts scratching the side wall loudly, and I zoom through the house making vague whispering noises. These poor explorers were getting more and more anxious until they reached the main room, at which point my friend and I let out piercing screams and chased them from the place. At least one of those people now fully believes in ghosts. Maybe all hauntings are just people doing projects who are losing their patience. A friend and I were exploring a newly abandoned building in the middle of the night, but that's not where the creepiness happened unless you count a giant pentagram spray painted on the floor. It was a college town, so we didn't think much of it. Before we really got much exploring done, we heard a dog barking nearby, so we went to see if we could find it. We did. Well, sort of. The dog was wearing a collar, so we were trying to get close enough to read the owner's information. It would let us get a couple of feet away before taking off again at lightning speed. Not that abnormal, but it got weirder. At one point we had it cornered at the bottom of a set of stairs into what was essentially a walled pit behind one of the dormitories. We watched it go down the stairs. My friend followed the dog down the stairs while I stood at the top of the brick wall to watch the dog as it ran behind one of the dumpsters. When my friend reached the area where the dumpsters were, the dog wasn't there. The door to the building was locked. I had not seen it run back up the steps and had been keeping an eye on the whole area, so it's doubtful I would have missed it. Then we heard the dog howling nearby, but not from where we thought it would be. Somewhat strange, but this still could be possible, right? So we followed the howling, because at this point it was getting a bit eerie. We didn't see the dog again for a while, but kept hearing it howling nearby. It was definitely moving. We followed it up a steep hill, which led off campus into a wooded area. At this point, we'd been chasing this dog for several hours as the sun was about to come up. We were still determined, especially after a whole night of chasing this mysterious dog. And this is where it got even weirder. We reached a steep embankment as we drew closer to the howling, whose tone had become almost mournful. We wondered if the dog was sick or hurt, so we climbed up to the top. What we found up there was not what we'd expected. There was no dog. Instead, there was a very old cabin which had almost completely collapsed with all the former owner's possessions still inside. There were no other cabins around, but that in itself wasn't terribly strange so much as it was interesting. And then, beside the cabin, we discovered what remained of an old doghouse, its pen knocked over and covered by pine needles. We never found the dog, and its howling stopped as soon as we reached the abandoned structure. Okay, but did you stop to consider that the dog was just really crafty and was trying to lead you away from the building that it was working on a project in? I'm just saying, all hauntings are just people working on projects. Spring of 2008, I lived in Bolingbrook, Illinois at the time. A friend and I were exploring an abandoned drive-in theater nearby. In the concessions building, it's complete darkness. I rounded the corner into a restroom and my flashlight illuminated a 55-gallon blue barrel smack in the middle of the floor. I near crapped myself. It was full of clear rainwater from the leaky roof and nothing more. Some context. When my husband and I were traveling in Moldova, I read about an abandoned Soviet military base in the woods. It was under construction when the Soviet Union fell, and so it had just been left as it was. Another group had visited it before us and taken some pretty good pictures as well, and I had to see it for myself. This base is in the middle of nowhere. I could tell from Google's satellite view that there was a road in, but when we got there, it turned out to be extremely difficult to travel this road by car. It was basically 3 square concrete blocks across, but someone had removed the middle of the 3 all the way down the road, so you'd have to balance your wheels on the other 2. There was also quite a few ruts and puddles in the road, and since we had a rental car that we didn't want to damage, we just parked near the entrance to this road and walked the 1.5 kilometers or so to the base. As we headed down this road, there was a group of 4 to 5 dogs standing in our way. We yelled to scare them off. One dog seemed curious rather than threatening and ended up following us the rest of the time we were at the base, which meant several kilometers of walking. It didn't seem very healthy and I wished we could take it home with us, but that was obviously impossible. Sadly, I didn't even have any food to offer it. As far as I'd seen, there were 3 major structures left on the base. One, just a skeleton of a building that had never been built, was easy enough to visit, but not exceptionally interesting. Then there was the administrative building, which was much more complete, but when we got near this, a very large number of dogs started barking. There appeared to be at least 20 dogs hanging out around this building, and they didn't sound very friendly at all. We abandoned this attempt and headed in the other direction toward the 3rd building, which was basically underground and quite unique in appearance. Between us and the 3rd building was a pile of rubble which we began to clamber over when my husband, who was taller than me, stopped and said, "There's someone living back there." We decided not to get involved with whoever this person was and whatever they were doing, but my husband said there was kind of a wooden shack with a guy hanging around. As we walked back toward the car, still quite a way away from it, a white van with 2 guys inside came down the concrete path. I suppose they traveled it often since they didn't have any trouble staying on the concrete blocks on each side and had obviously dealt with the ruts. I was quite anxious about these guys and what they might be up to at this abandoned base in the middle of nowhere, but they didn't stop or give us any trouble. All of this was probably fairly harmless, but since I hadn't really expected to see any life at all in this abandoned Soviet base in the middle of nowhere, it felt very creepy. I'm not gonna lie, this story feels like one big creepy tease. I feel like we kept just getting outside hints at the true creepiness within, all for basically no payoff. There was an old factory about a mile from my house growing up. I explored it when I was about 13. Must have been abandoned for many years because the second floor had fallen down on the first floor. Well, it was winter and I was walking around the third floor and I found two really big coolers, both of them filled to the top of rubber gloves. But these rubber gloves were actually filled with ice, so they looked like there were hands in them. They must have been filled in summer and stayed there till winter. No clue as to what or why. No water or ice in the cooler, just the full tied-off rubber gloves. Must have been at least 100 of them. Building was torn down less than a year later. I'm not an urban explorer or anything, but when I was around 12 or 13, I broke into a very small abandoned house near my uncle's cottage. The owner of that house was a man who had died some 20 to 25 years ago. The whole place was completely untouched, so I'm pretty sure the last persons to be there before me were the EMTs who locked up after they took away the body. The bed where the guy died probably was unmade and messy. The pillow and the blankets were half-eaten by moths. Same with the clothes hanging in the closet. Floor was covered in rat crap. There were dirty dishes in the sink, which were stained yellow. On the bathroom table, there was an open book and some others stacked next to it. In the drawers, there was some random stuff, matchboxes, shaving kit, etc. Other than that, it seemed the guy died completely broke since there was nothing else in the house. No photos or documents, no TV or radio, no extra furniture or any other items. Doors and windows were locked, so no one else had been there. The man who died had no relatives, according to my uncle, and was only 45 to 50 years old. Honestly, that just sounds more sad than creepy. A man who had died with no one to pass his things on to, and frankly, not much to pass on. My mom was traveling for work and sat next to a man, fellow business traveler, on the plane. They had a casual conversation and exchanged business cards. Later that evening, she's in her hotel watching TV and gets a phone call from the front desk that her husband is here and they want to know if they can give him a key to the room. Turns out that creep on the plane was pretending to be her husband to try to get into her room. Geez, good thing they confirmed with her first. That's super creepy. I was traveling out of the country right after finishing up a huge 5-day work event where I had about 10 hours of sleep total during the 5 days. I got to the motel, which is kind of run down, and the carpet and blankets are damp, but I'm so exhausted I don't even really think about it. I fall asleep pretty much immediately at like 8 p.m. local time. At maybe 11 p.m. or so, I get a call from the motel phone saying there's been a complaint about noise. I tell them that's impossible, I've been sleeping. They ask me if maybe it's someone else in the room, and I tell them nope, I'm here alone, so there's definitely no one else making noise. They ask me again if I'm sure I'm by myself and not causing any noise. I say yes again, fall back asleep immediately. When I woke up, I thought about it some more. I realized how weird the entire interaction was. There was absolutely no noise I could hear anywhere nearby, and I don't know why the motel staff would need to clarify so many times that I was alone. Apparently, they never called. So I assume it must have been someone calling the different rooms to see who was in the rooms and how many people. I've never been so glad to always use the extra latch chain lock. They ask me again if I'm sure I'm by myself. Well, it's just me and these 3 large bikers with baseball bats, but they don't make much noise. Never tell a stranger that you are alone. People calling pretending to be the front desk just to see if I'm alone in my hotel room is not something I've ever considered before. It is now the only thing I'll be thinking about the next time I'm in a hotel room unable to sleep. Great. Family vacation, 1 a.m. My brother and I had just finished watching The Shining on TV. Neither of us had seen it before. We heard someone trying to open our door. No one else was supposed to have keys. Someone tried to swing open the door, but the hotel lock stopped them. They kept trying to open it multiple times, banging the door against the lock. After a few tries, they gave up. The hotel desk clerk accidentally entered the wrong room for their key cards. It was probably the best way I saw The Shining. I can't be scared more than that from that movie. That's happened to me once. The housekeeping ladies weren't giving an updated room rental schedule and tried to get into my room at 6 a.m. one morning. I'd used the chain bolt thing and everyone was very confused. Super terrifying way to wake up though. When I was 12, I was staying in a motel with my mom on a road trip. We were in the middle of nowhere in Texas at a motel that had a decent rating in our guidebook and was really cheap, so we went for it. In the middle of the night, the owner knocked on the door and told us we had to leave because he wanted the room for someone else. My mom was outside arguing with him while I was gathering our things, and I was terrified because I heard him start yelling. I looked out the window and saw about half a dozen bikers in vests appear out of nowhere, maybe a nearby room, and start confronting the owner. My mom came inside quickly and we watched them start harassing the guy. Things like, "She's paid to be here, you're gonna let her stay tonight. We don't want to ever hear crap like this from you again." And the owner was saying things like, "I don't want any trouble." Everybody left fairly quickly and we didn't ever hear anything about it the next day at checkout. We weren't able to sleep very well because we were so shook up, but it was better than getting in the car again. Thank you, anonymous biker gang. Unexpectedly wholesome. Biker gangs, or what more sounds like a motorcycle club, are generally pretty big on helping people. They might not care a ton about the law, but a lot of them care about people. Kind of like the opposite of certain other people. In 1996, while air drying naked after a shower lying on my hotel bed in Beijing with the curtains drawn, I received a call demanding I put on clothes. Hidden camera, but demanding you not be naked. I toured around in bands a lot in my 20s, and not once, but twice came back to my hotel room to find a turd in my shower. I was the only person with a key to the room. One was in Germany and one was in Belgium. 2 years apart, completely separate tour and crew. Phantom Crapper strikes again. Did the couchsurfing.com thing with a friend a few years ago. We were both big guys, so typically feel safe everywhere we go. Show up at the house, 60-year-old guy opens the door while on the phone. He's only wearing sweatpants. He signals for us to enter. He continues his conversation and ends with an "I love you." He turns to us and says welcome and apologizes for being on the phone. He starts talking about his girlfriend, who he was talking with, and how she lives overseas. He mentions he has several girlfriends and boasts about being a ladies' man. He then starts to show us pictures. These girls looked like they were 14. While sliding through the pic, he accidentally showed us one of their passports. This weirded us out a lot. We were early 20s and didn't really know what to do, so we said we were tired and wanted to sleep. He walked us to the room while rubbing his belly. Told us we make breakfast in the morning. We decided to sleep the night, but leave before he woke up. My friend slept on the bedroom door, so he couldn't sneak in. We got up super early and bolted. We got super weird vibes from the guy and just felt gross/weird about the whole thing. Jesus, you really should have reported. Think you could still report, actually. Couldn't agree with the commenter there. If you think something is up with a guy like that, you report it. Stayed in a B&B in Pennsylvania that seemed cute enough. They did have a wall of antique dolls in the main room, but otherwise no signs of weirdness. That's until we settled in the room. I noticed some scratches on the floor near a bookcase, and after some inspection realized it was a secret door. When I asked the owner, who gave a creepy vibe, if it worked, he said yes and showed me that it opened to their office, which was a cluttered room with a computer and piles of crap. It had a lock on their side, and when I asked if there was a lock on my side, he smiled and said no. When I showed some concern that there was an unlockable entrance to my room that was camouflaged that they didn't tell me about, he just kept smiling. So that night, no intercourse, fear of cameras, and I barricaded the freaking door and barely slept. Edit. It was many years ago, before Facebook/Twitter, etc., so we were racking our brains to remember the name. It was near New Hope, Pennsylvania, is all we can remember at this point. Edit 2. New Hope is lovely, except creepy place. That's some Bates Motel crap right there. I'm not sure if this qualifies or not. Let me know. When I was like 14 or 15, I went with my family to Las Vegas and we stayed off the main strip in a 2-bedroom suite. It was a smaller casino/hotel. My parents left to go out and enjoy the night while I stayed with my younger siblings. They slept in the bedrooms and I was in the living room watching TV. I think I dozed off around midnight, and when I woke up, I was in a stairwell outside of the hotel room. I had no shoes on, I had no cell phone, no room key. I went to the front office and told them I was locked out of my room, and they believed me and gave me a key. I still don't know why I was out there. To this day, I have never sleepwalked. I don't know what happened. Maybe I did sleepwalk, maybe something happened during those hours that I cannot remember. It was creepy enough for me to share. I'm gonna go ahead and let you know that absolutely does count, and is indeed incredibly creepy. Any possible reasons I can think of for that to happen creep me out. Was in San Juan del Sur, Nicaragua last year. Massive spiders all over the room. Even woke up with a couple of little scorpions in my bed the first morning. Next night, I'm sitting at the bar drinking and chatting with a mate, feel a tickle on the back of my neck, and think it's a mosquito or something. Brush the back of my neck and another mother effing scorpion, this time way bigger, plops on the ground at my feet. Stared at it for a moment in shock, squealed like a girl, squashed it, and kept drinking. God, I hate those big spiders in Nicaragua. They're so fast, and if they come in contact with you, you'll get a painful rash. Well, there is now no force on earth that could get me to willingly enter the country of Nicaragua. I've spent a lot of time getting better with my arachnophobia, but that sounds like my own personal hell. Okay, so I already posted this on another thread, but when I was about 4 years old, my family ended up staying at the Cedar Lodge Motel where Cary Stayner worked right before he murdered 4 women. My family drove to Yosemite, and it was a long drive for us. 3 kids, all under the age of 7, plus 2 adults, and a F-ton of mountains will do that. By the time we arrived at the motel, it was late, we were all cranky, and we couldn't wait to get out. But the moment we pulled in, something set my mom's teeth on edge, and she insisted that we left and found another hotel, reservation or not. My mom has always had this, sixth sense, and her gut has actually saved us a couple of times, but my dad was tired and convinced her to ignore her gut and stay for just the night, and the next morning we'd leave. I can remember my mom actually refusing to let go of our hands, making us stay right by her side as she kept looking around while checking in. To try and get her to relax, my dad suggested we go to the pool, thinking it would calm her down. Well, when we got there were no towels, so my mom called the front desk. The moment the man delivering towels arrived, my mom immediately grabbed us out of the water and rushed us back to the room. The man gave her the absolute creeps, and she says there was just this feeling of pure evil when he looked at us. That night, my mom and dad pushed the dresser in front of the door and had us all sleep in the same bed. The next morning, we left to go to another hotel, but my mom couldn't stop talking about how evil that motel was. About 2 months later, she and my dad were up late watching the news when they started reporting on a man who had murdered a woman and 2 young girls in Yosemite. Just as my mom began to say, "I bet it was at that motel," they showed Cary Stayner's face and said it occurred at the Cedar Lodge Motel. Cary Stayner was the man who brought us our towels at that pool. We've never gone back to Yosemite, and my mom is always insistent that we listen to our gut feeling, and when every bone in your body is telling you something is wrong, get the F out. Too long didn't read. We stayed in a motel where serial killer Cary Stayner worked, and my mom's gut told her he was a fricking creep. We have a winner. Yeah, I don't believe in the supernatural or psychic powers, but some people just have a perception and intuition about places and people that I just can't explain. Sounds like this mom is a regular miner's canary for trouble. As a young kid, I had nightmares of waking up to see my mother hovering over my bed by the window. She'd just blankly stare down at me and my sister. I'd get so scared, yelling, "Mom, Mom," and she never responded. I knew it was not my mom. When I was older, I told my aunt about it, and she told me they weren't dreams, it was real. My mom would go into our rooms randomly to check on us. She had serious mental health issues that got worse over the years. Occasionally, she would have episodes of anxiety of something happening to us and guard us at night. Due to the traumatic death of her first child, it apparently triggered obsessive anxiety when we were younger. I now know the whole messed up backstory and can sympathize with why it would make any parent get to that mental state, but I still shudder when I think of the blank-faced stare. I still tend to associate the nightmare mom as not being my mom. I feel bad for your mom because I can't even imagine dealing with that kind of trauma, but that sounds terrifying as a kid. It's really scary for a kid to see their parent not reacting to them correctly because they're supposed to be the people you most trust and know at that point. I was 24 and working at a startup.com. I went a weekend at my parents' house, came back to my apartment, and went into my bedroom where I saw my bed was made. Felt my heart stutter as I stood frozen in the doorway because I never ever made my bed. It was something I consciously refused to do. After the initial shock, I went through the apartment examining the closets, under the bed, etc. I calmed down after a while, convincing myself that I must have made the bed before I left for my parents and I'd just forgotten about it. Deep down, I knew it wasn't true, but I couldn't think of any other explanation. I later found out it was the woman I was dating at the time who did it. She was the person who hired me. We'd been in a relationship less than a month, but she managed to somehow get a copy of my key. She used to visit my place and snoop through my things when I was gone. She also slept in my bed overnight several times when I was away for the weekend. If she hadn't made my bed, I never would have known anything was going on. I had a blind dog growing up, and she barked at things that were there and things that weren't. One night, around midnight, she woke up my mom and I, my dad's too heavy of a sleeper, by barking at the wall next to the back door. I woke up, but I was maybe 9, so I went right back to sleep. My mom got up and ushered her back to bed. That same night, an arsonist hit my neighborhood. He set fire to a luckily vacant house for sale and it burned to the ground. Following his footsteps in the snow, he then passed between my bedroom and our garage and nearly lit our garage. Then our dog and my mom woke up and we think that scared him away and he went across the street and burned the neighbor's garage instead. Then he stood in the front yard and watched it burn. He walked out onto the street and they lost his footsteps. They never caught him. Rest in peace, Oreo. I miss you. You were a very good pup. Love you. Be good. This did not happen to me, but it happened in my city when I was in high school. A family thought that their house was haunted because things like furniture and objects would randomly move or go missing. This went on for several months. They even reached out to their pastor to bless the house. Well, the house wasn't haunted. It turned out that a drifter had wandered in at some point and had been living in their attic. He would come out when the family was at work and eat their food and go through their things for cash and stuff to sell. One day, one of the family members came home unexpectedly and caught them. Called police for an active break-in. The cops quickly discovered what had been going on. Parasite. I was 7 years old, home alone. My parents went for dinner at around 9 p.m. They left me in bed for me to sleep. Hours passed and still couldn't sleep. Went downstairs to get some milk and cookies to watch TV in my parents' bedroom. While I was getting my snacks, I felt like someone grabbed my shoulder hardly. I was so scared I couldn't even turn around to check who did it. I stayed there frozen for at least 1 minute straight. I had the balls to run and went to my parents' bedroom. I locked myself in there and didn't get out until my parents came home. It was 3 a.m. and heard my parents' car park outside the window. I was never so happy for them to come home. As soon as my parents get in the house, my mom screamed and called 911. The thing I thought was a ghost that grabbed me was actually an addict who secretly lived in our basement and that night thought nobody was home, so went to grab some snacks from the fridge too and confused my shoulder with the fridge's door and then passed out. Still freaks me out to this day. Okay, I feel like 7 is a little too young to be leaving a kid home alone. Is that just me? I don't have kids, but I feel like this is way too young, especially if you have cockroaches or addicts, you know? I didn't think this was paranormal, but definitely thought it was creepy and ended up being more than I bargained for. When I was 13, I had a small jewelry box my mom gave me that had cushions for rings. I had 6 rings that I kept in it. Nothing of value, think mood rings and silver rings. I was somewhat neurotic as a kid and had spent an afternoon arranging my room, and I'd put the 6 rings in a specific order. I opened the box one day and noticed that 2 of the rings were out of order. I thought someone in my family had moved them because there was zero explanation for this. I asked my family if anyone had touched them and they all insisted no one had opened the box. But I was convinced that someone had to have gone through it. My dad ended up going through our entire house checking for missing stuff, and the only missing things were an old bottle of hydrocodone from the medicine cabinet and some of my mom's gold jewelry from a bathroom drawer. Turns out there had been strings of robberies in the neighborhood where thieves had broken in but only taken prescription drugs and small gold items. None of the robberies had indications that the homes had been broken into, and things like laptops, diamond jewelry, and other valuables had been left alone. My family wouldn't have known anything was amiss aside from the fact I was so convinced something was off. This sounds like the introduction of the main character in some kind of kid's detective book. Frankly, if it is, it worked because I'm here for it. Not sure if this really counts, but about 5 years ago I got a phone call from my brother and he just kept mumbling into the phone. He kept muttering random words, and because I was younger, stupid me thought he was possessed or something. But he had just had a seizure and had just woken up. My brother gets really woozy and panicky after he has a seizure. It scared the living hell out of me. I like how your first assumption was that he was possessed, LOL. I had a friend who was staying at a ski lodge, and he went outside at night to smoke a cigarette. While he was out there, he said it seemed like an invisible monster was coming right at him. He heard it stomping, even smelled it, felt its breath as it charged him, and then it passed through him and it was gone. Turns out it was a grizzly bear stomping its way around on the floor directly underneath where he was. When my friends and I initially entered college, we used to chill a lot at my friend's dad's house, who lived out in the country. Late at night, when scanning the horizon, you could see all of the stars. It wasn't like the city, but you could also see a radio tower perhaps a few miles away. One late fall night, maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, we decided to drive out to this radio tower just out of curiosity. It was in the middle of a large field with one entrance which happened to be open. We entered from there and drove about a quarter mile in towards the radio tower. When we got there, we noticed underneath the radio tower a rusty beat-up car. The thing looked like it hadn't been driven in years. We pulled to the other side of the tower and just chilled for a bit, talking about whatever and listening to music. Then one of my friends pointed toward the beat-up car. "Does it look like there's a light in there?" he said. We all stared at the car, and sure enough, emanating beneath the dust-covered windows of the car was a dim light. We pretty quickly put our car in drive and started moving out of there. It was a field though, so of course we moved relatively slow. The same friend who pointed out the light noticed that the car started moving along with us, following slowly. It didn't put on its headlights, but the light inside the car seemed to glow brighter. That was the moment that my friend driving screamed, "F it!" and hightailed it faster than I'd ever seen. We left the junk car in the dust, literally in this case, and from that day we'd always referred to this story as the ghost car story. Did we really believe in ghosts? Probably not, but paranormal is better than whatever else it could have been. Come to find out, a few years later, that field was regularly being monitored by the local sheriff's office for big drug deals that apparently went down there. Had we stuck around any longer that night than we did, we could have legitimately been killed. This was also in the era that we watched a lot of Breaking Bad, so in retrospect, it seemed to us like that could have very much been a likely outcome from that night. Luckily, we're all good and nothing bad ever came of it for any of us. I mean, I like that whatever drug dealer was in that car waited a bit and then decided that instead of stepping out with a gun or something, he figured the best course of action was to scare you off like a Scooby-Doo villain would. For several months during my senior year of high school and all through the summer before I left for college, I kept hearing noises coming from the attic above my bedroom. I would only hear it at night, and I told my parents and brothers that it sounded like someone walking in the attic and dragging a chain on the ground. My dad even had me go to sleep on the couch one night so he could sleep in my room to try and hear it. My older brother went up into the attic. Nothing. I left for college and didn't really think much of it. When I returned for my first visit home, my dad revealed he'd found a slow leak in one of the pipes that rotted a hole in the ceiling above my bed. The drip of water had been ricocheting around the pipes, sounding like chains dragging. Well, definitely not supernatural, but also not, as the thread said, something scarier. Unless you're really terrified of water damage, which I suppose to homeowners is pretty scary. The Smiling Man. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite, but all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways away from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street on my side was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward. Smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him. And then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the F do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper, "What the f-?" Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid, but he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way. And this time, he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high, he looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see. Okay, once again, I have no idea if this story is true, but I can tell you one thing for sure. It is one of the creepiest stories I've read in one of these threads. I might need to use this in the next horror TTRPG I run, because damn! My dad died of cancer the day I turned 16 after about 2 weeks in a coma. It was really fast, less than 2 months between diagnosis and death. He died in the house. We had a hospice attendant, and my mom was very good about seeing to him in those final days. Anyway, a lot of weird crap happened after he passed, but the one that still freaks me out when I think about it happened about 12 hours before he took to bed for the last time. He was in our living room napping on the couch while my mom was in the kitchen cooking. No one else was home. Suddenly, he jerked awake and was shouting for my mom in a very loud, agitated voice, clearly angry with her. "Beverly, don't do that! Don't ever do that again!" She ran into the room, alarmed, and asked what he was talking about, and he said, "Don't do that. Don't walk past me like that in that long black wig." Sometimes I think he saw death. I was about 15 minutes from finishing the night shift at work when there was a massive crash on one of the windows in the office, so I get up and go to check it out. Someone has thrown quite a sizable rock through one of the windows on the front of the building. This is made especially weird because I'm working in the industrial district at 11:30 at night with none of the other businesses open. I go back to my desk, put a quick call through to security to let them know, and decide to head home. As I'm leaving the building, I'm freaking myself out about it more and more and end up running to my car, getting in, and taking off. I'm almost home and I've started to calm down a bit when I realize that I didn't unlock my car when I got in. It had been unlocked the whole time. I do a quick check with my hand in the back seat for any possible murderers that might be hanging around there, but there's nothing there. Fast forward 30 minutes. I've called a friend of mine who says he is out drinking, so I decide I'm going to join him. I jump on my bicycle and start riding over. I'm doodling along the road on my bike. It's a nice night and I'm in no big rush, just enjoying the moonlight when I hear someone riding behind me. I straighten up and stick to one side of the road. He passes me really slowly, and when he is right beside me, he shoots me a smile I can describe as purely insane. I kind of flinch and am taken aback as he rides on. That's when I realize he is riding my mom's bike. Needless to say, I sprint home. When I get there, sure enough, her bike is missing and one of my car's doors is open, the back left one. I was driving and had no need to open that door. I house sit for a family friend when she goes out of town. The woman who lives there is really into a bunch of spiritual stuff, New Age stuff, Reiki, etc. The very first time I was house sitting, I was outside watering the plants. I was the only one there and had closed the door after me. From the driveway where I was watering, I had a completely unobstructed view of the front door, the only door that was unlocked at the time. When I went back inside, there on the little table next to the front door was a half-eaten cookie. The table had been completely clear when I went outside, and I hadn't seen cookies that looked like that anywhere in the house. Nothing too creepy, but very puzzling and unsettling. When the woman returns, I mention it to her, and she laughs and she goes, "Gets ghosts all the time." I'm a fairly skeptical person, but honestly, ghosts were the best explanation. The next time I was over, I was pooping around 10:30. The house itself is fairly old and creaks from time to time, but nothing too loud or disruptive. While I was pooping, here comes a single loud knock from the other side of the bathroom door. This wasn't a little creak or pop from the house, it was a loud, determined rap on the door. It was enough to scare my poop back in for the rest of the night. You said poop one too many times. I'm gonna have to fine you for that one, OP. I was buying a house last year, and one of the places I decided to look at was a renovated farmhouse. The main building itself was pretty nice and I was considering it as an option, but then the realtor took me to check out the old barn that was on the property. From the outside, it looked like it could be converted into a really nice workshop. I walked inside and almost immediately felt something fall on my head. I brushed it away and did the get off me dance until it fell to the ground. It was a tiny spider. Then another drop on my head. I repeated my freak out and got another, larger spider out of my hair. Then I made the mistake of looking up. There was a huge black spot on the wall, which I realized after my eyes focused was the biggest effing cluster of spiders I've ever seen in my life. In that moment, I was a faster sprinter than Usain Bolt. Ah! I hate it. I hate it so much. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.